Joining us now for an exclusive Newsmaker interview is one of the leading constitutionalist conservatives in Congress, one of the Tea Party favorites, Senator Rand Paul. Mr. Paul, Senator, Happy New Year, and thank you so much for coming on the Kuhner Report.
Well, Happy New Year to you, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, sir. A lot to talk about. It's been a really busy last 10, 12 days during the Christmas holiday season. But I've got to ask you, this is a moment that many of us constitutionalists, libertarians, conservatives, whatever you want to call us, have been waiting for. Following in the footsteps of your father, Ron Paul, you are now a couple days away from finally getting a vote on Audit the Fed legislation. For all of the listeners out there, why is this bill so important? Why do we need to audit the Federal Reserve? And how is it crushing working and middle-class people in this country?
You know, every transaction that you perform on a day-to-day basis involves money, and the Federal Reserve controls the money, the amount of it, and the value of it. And I don't think this should be done in secret. Congress created the Fed, and yet the Fed resists and chafes and says, oh, we don't need any oversight. I think they do need transparency. In 2008, when we had the financial crisis, the Fed actually was buying and selling foreign banks. And I just don't think that that kind of activity should go on without any kind of scrutiny by Congress or by the taxpayer. I also think that income inequality, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, is made worse by the Federal Reserve because as they create the money, it first goes into the hands of the big banks, and as it filters out into society, prices rise, and by the time the new money makes its way to the middle class and to the working class, they face rising prices, and the new money isn't as value to them. The other thing is by depressing interest rates, middle-class Americans often would put money in banks to gain interest when they were saving. Now that's been utterly destroyed, and those who have the ability to invest in the stock market, we've seen a great inflation in the stock market as well. But I think the Federal Reserve, at the very least, deserves scrutiny. And so I've worked for 5 years to get this vote, and finally, on January 12th, we're going to have a vote. And so I hope all of your listeners will call their senators and try to get their senators to vote for Audit the Fed.
Senator, to me, one of the big issues about the Federal Reserve, and both you and your father have been so eloquent, I think, and incisive on this point, is essentially you have an unaccountable, unelected body with vast economic powers that really affect tens and tens and tens of millions of Americans, especially middle-class Americans, working-class Americans, as you say, by increasing the money supply, by essentially printing money, you're raising prices, food prices, prices across the board, you're hammering savings. Is it time to eventually get rid of the Federal Reserve?
At the very least, we start with auditing it, but I do think that we need to take power away from the Fed. I think that interest rates, which are the price of money, should be freely fluctuating like the price of bread, and that if you understand that price controls are bad in any commodities, price controls are also bad when it comes to money, because if you keep the price of the money artificially low, people think it's a boom time. We should keep building more houses, build more houses. But then in the end, what happens is you get overbuilt and there's no signal to slow down. In a normal marketplace, the interest rates would rise and tell home builders it's time to slow down, that we need to quit building houses or we'll get overbuilt. But what happened in 2007 is they went on 4 or 5 years into the housing craze, and they never got the signal to stop building houses, and then we had this enormous collapse. And then the Fed simply just bought up all the bad mortgages. So the Fed now owns, actually, it's funny, your dollar, instead of being backed by gold, your dollar is now backed by used car loans and bad home loans, which is kind of a scary thought.
Incredible. Senator, I have to ask you this. You've been sending out some press releases in them and emails to supporters and potential supporters, and you take aim at Senator Ted Cruz. And you say that unlike you, he has not been a leader in terms of holding the Federal Reserve accountable. You even mentioned that he drafted a legal brief apparently praising President Obama's nearly $1 trillion stimulus. Can you expand on that?
It's just a difference of opinion. I believe Ted Cruz looked at the crisis in 2008, and he said that the problem was that the Fed didn't lower interest rates dramatically enough or fast enough, whereas the free market libertarians and capitalists, those who follow von Mises and Hayek and Adam Smith, those of us who do say that, the problem wasn't that the Fed lowered the interest rates too slowly. The problem was that the Federal Reserve shouldn't be involved with dictating and mandating what the interest rates are. So it's just a difference of opinion. And so this will happen, and it's an election. We're friends, but at the same time, we're competitors, and we, part of my job is to distinguish myself from him on issues.
So it's not personal, it's business.
Absolutely.
Senator, Obama is now planning a major town hall this week on CNN. There are press reports coming out. He plans a huge executive action, an illegal action on gun control. What should Republicans do? What should conservatives do? And what will Senator Rand Paul do?
I have legislation that would stop him, that would take away any funding for any executive order that has any limitations on the Second Amendment. The problem we have is that in order for my bill to pass, it would take 6 Democrats to vote with us as well as all the Republicans. We probably won't get that. But we have to look at the ultimate problem, really, is we gave up our leverage. When we recently passed that omnibus, we gave President Obama a year's worth of spending. So he can take any of that money, use it for his executive order, and he doesn't have to ask for new money. So this is a real, gut-wrenching problem of what's going on in Washington, is that a Republican Congress gave up the reins, gave up the power of the purse, gave up our leverage. We basically preemptively announced our defeat, and that's where we are now. So if he does this on the Second Amendment, we don't have a lot of power to stop him because we foolishly gave him a year's worth of spending.
Senator, if he's acting like a king, if he's acting unconstitutionally, if he's now assaulting and violating our Second Amendment rights, what if Congress won't stop him, if they won't use the power of the purse, frankly, what good are the Republicans in Congress?
This is a great question. And this is what I've been arguing for the past 6 months, is that Republicans are abdicating their power, they're abdicating their duty, and they've given up. And this is a problem. It's not all Republicans. I didn't. Many of us have voted to stop all of these things. But about, a small percentage of the Republicans sided with the Democrats on this. And they basically decided that it's more important to govern, to be the adults in the room and keep government open than it is to try to make government only spend what comes in, to quit borrowing $1 million a minute. I frankly think that borrowing $1 million a minute is more of a threat to the country than any kind of temporary expiration of spending. So I would let it all expire. I'd let all spending expire, and then I would tell the Democrats, guess what? If you want to fund an executive order, limiting the Second Amendment, you need 60 votes. See, the shoe would be on the other foot if we were to let spending expire. Same with Planned Parenthood. They want to fund Planned Parenthood, they would have to get 60 votes to fund Planned Parenthood. But right now, the way it exists, they've got funding for anything they want to do for a year. In fact, when we raised the debt ceiling, or Congress raised the debt ceiling, they raised it an unspecified amount. That's why I kept them up till 3 a.m. haranguing them, saying, this is crazy. You're giving President Obama unlimited spending authority, unlimited borrowing authority for an entire year.
Senator, I know obviously you're in New Hampshire today. You'll be in New Hampshire tomorrow. You're vigorously campaigning to be the Republican presidential nominee. But let me be perfectly candid with you. I get a lot of texts and a lot of emails from people who listen to you and say, amen, amen, amen. And the question they keep asking me, which I'm going to ask you now, is, do we have the wrong Republican from Kentucky, the wrong senator from Kentucky, being the Senate Majority Leader? Senate Majority Leader Rand Paul would stop Obama dead in his tracks. And is Mitch McConnell up to the job?
The problem is there is not enough conservative senators to have any change in leadership. The leadership is decided basically over decades and decades of, we're talking about friendships of 5, 10, 15, 20 people. And it's very difficult to have any changes in that. And it won't happen until there's a groundswell from people and sending new people to Washington that say, you know what, we don't want government to shut down, but we're willing to see it all expire in order to get reforms. instead of the message they seem to be getting, or they think they're getting, this message that at all costs don't shut it down, at all costs don't let any kind of spending expire, because that the people would be angry with that. And I think they just aren't visiting with the people enough, because the grassroots I visit with are absolutely of the mind that if we do not reform government, we are in danger of destroying the country.
Senator, Hillary Clinton is in New Hampshire, or was over the weekend. Her husband is now doing events by himself. A state Republican, a representative, Catherine Prudhomme O'Brien, confronted Hillary about the fact that her husband, allegedly sexual predator, even an alleged rapist regarding Juanita Broderick, and that she basically helped to aid and abet an alleged sexual predator. Is her husband and his activities, especially the alleged sexual assaults, and her role in trying to cover it up and protect him, is that a legitimate campaign issue in your view?
Well, I don't think it's Hillary Clinton's fault that her husband has committed serial infidelities, and his behavior isn't necessarily her fault. But, a couple of weeks ago, she brought up in a speech, and she said that women who are victims of sexual assault should be believed until disproved. And there have been many who have accused Bill Clinton of these same sort of activities. So I guess the question is Hillary Clinton has brought this on herself by saying that women should be believed, and yet she was big on, calling all the women that accused Bill of his different advances and harassment and possible other allegations. She was big on calling them the bimbos and maybe having a bimbo alert so she could stifle this. And the question is, can she have it both ways? Can she be this champion of women who are victims of sexual abuse, except for when that applies to her husband? I think it's difficult for her. I think the other thing that's difficult for her is that, she's accepted tens of millions of dollars from countries who have terrible records when it comes regarding women's rights. In Saudi Arabia, a girl was raped by 7 men, and then she was publicly whipped and punished for being in a car with an unmarried man. And so I think that she has to explain to women voters in our country why they would want to respect and vote for a woman who's taken, millions of dollars from the Sultan of Brunei, where they stone women for adultery. So she has a lot of explaining to do, and I don't think it's just clear cut that she will get the vote of women when it's seen all these inconsistencies in her behavior.
Senator, I know we're up against it. You're very busy, but I've got to ask you this. Your rival, Senator Marco Rubio, is in New Hampshire, and he didn't mention you by name, but clearly the implication was aimed at you. He's been decrying and attacking so-called isolationist candidates who want to weaken our military and intelligence capabilities. And he said in particular, words and political stunts cannot ensure our security. ISIS cannot be filibustered. Taking a shot at you and also Senator Ted Cruz about your stands opposing the NSA spying program and other issues. Are you an isolationist, and what do you say to Rubio's attacks that you're weak on national security?
Well, Rubio's also been saying that ISIS would have supported the NSA reforms on, bulk collection of phone data. But I think the truth of the matter is that what ISIS really would have supported was Rubio's Gang of Eight bill that would have given them easier access to come into our country and attack us. So I think you can't be for national security and for defending the country if you're not first for defending the border. So I think actually Marco Rubio is the weakest candidate on national defense, because you cannot have a strong national defense if you're not willing to first defend the border. When he brought his Gang of Eight bill forward, I put forward amendments to try to make it a conservative bill, to try to have increased border security, and Rubio sided with Chuck Schumer on every occasion to oppose any conservative amendments. So no, I think he's got it exactly backwards. I think it's really a weakness for him that his inability to support border security has shown him really truly not to be a strong national defense conservative.
We have been talking with Senator Rand Paul, GOP presidential nominee. He is holding a town hall today in Laconia, New Hampshire. He's going to be there today and tomorrow. Laconia today. Doors open at 6:30 p.m. The event begins at 7 p.m. You can go to hashtag #StandWithRand on social media if you want to post your photos from the event. Tomorrow, he's got a very busy day. essentially at noon, 11:55 to be precise. He's going to be in Manchester, New Hampshire. After that, in the afternoon at 3 o'clock in Concord, New Hampshire. And then in the evening at 6:30 in Exeter, New Hampshire. Senator Paul, thank you so much for coming, and best of luck to you, sir.
Thanks, Jeff.
God bless you.